Hi, everybody. Hope you're all having a great day today. My name is Brittany, and I will be your studio host from Etchr Lab today. We have the wonderful Nicholas Holman. He's going to be doing a landscape with a house, so I guess like an architectural type landscape. And you're doing gouache, right? Not watercolor.
Yeah, gouache.
So just a couple little things to point out before I let Nick take over. If you have a question, just please type it in the chat with all capital letters so I can defer it easier from a comment. We will be doing a little Q&A session at the end. So any non-relevant questions that come up, I'll kind of save them for that. So if you don't see your question come up right away, don't worry, I'll probably save it for the Q&A. If by chance it becomes relevant, then I'll ask it. But yeah, other than that, I'll save it for the Q&A. Nicholas will be painting for an hour, and the Q&A will just be like 5 minutes at the end. Other than that, I'll be casually dropping a few links to things and other information into the chat. So don't forget to pay attention once in a while to there. With that being said, I'll let Nick take over.
Hey everyone, thanks for being here. I'm super happy and excited to paint for you. So I wanted to start, so my primary painting medium is gouache. I just love everything about it. And I chose a white building because when you're painting white, it usually creates really beautiful blue shadows. So you'll see here, even though like the warmness of the white really pushes the blueness of the shadows. So that is what excited me, and the shadow shapes of the reference photo they have access to, correct?
Yeah, if not, I can put it in the chat for them. So okay. If you don't have access to it, I'll just drop it in the link for you guys right now. Drop it in the chat, sorry.
So the reason I chose this painting was because of those beautiful, or this reference photo was because of those beautiful shadow shapes. And I have a few other examples that I just wanted to show of like white or kind of like structural paintings. So this is a white building.
I'm just gonna sorry to interrupt you. I'm just gonna spotlight your workspace.
Cool.
Yeah.
So this is a white building, but it's at sunset. So it's like really warm with really, really cool shadows. I just love that combination. These are some color studies that I do of Florence with, you know, different whites and figuring out the temperatures of my shadows and stuff like that. And just a few other white buildings, just showing you how I like to paint the shadows, focusing on value, but also focusing on the temperature of those shadows is super important to me. And then yesterday I did a little warm up, which was a little bigger of this barn. I know it's at an angle. And then I painted a building at sunset. On this one, I used oil brushes, so it's a lot looser lines. So I'll be doing that a little bit today, along with just like traditional flat gouache brushes by Etchr. So I guess without further ado, I will jump in and start painting.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
By the way, so your dad says hi.
What's up, Dad? I was wondering if he might make it today. Okay, so on the left here, I'm going to do just a quick thumbnail to show you how I'm looking at this perspective. And then I will draw, this will be my final side over here. I am using the Etchr Sketchbook. It's hot press watercolor paper, and I absolutely love it. I think the paper is perfect. So I always try and put things in a box because it helps me think of the composition. Even if you're just doing a thumbnail, it just helps you to have it within a box. Hopefully.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, would we be able to see that a little bit closer?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Cool.
Just because the pencil lines are a little bit lighter, so it's hard.
Yeah, yeah, I see that. Okay, so essentially, this is going to be 2-point perspective. So I always start with a line here. And if you're looking at the reference photo, normally 2-point perspective, you've got a line going this way, and then down, and it like makes a box. Unfortunately, the person that took this photo was at eye level. So this bottom line is going totally horizontal. So I don't like that. So that is a change that I'm going to make because I want to push the perspective just a little further. So I like to start with this corner, and then I'm going to push that perspective a little further. And then this left side in shadow is much shorter than this main side. And that helps it recede into space and push that perspective even further. And then I'll pull this angle of the roof up. Just thinking about those big shapes. And this is just a thumbnail warming up. I recommend, like, if you're new to structures or just painting perspective, do a few thumbnails. It'll really help you understand what's going on.
So we got a question about gouache.
Yeah.
Can gouache be dried out and then rehydrated on location? I guess to use like a pan and then
yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's very similar to watercolor in that regard. It can absolutely just be reactivated. I use mine wet. I used to use mine dry, but I've transitioned into only using mine wet. So I keep mine in this little airtight container. I just feel like you get better textures when it's wet, but absolutely it can totally dry out and be reactivated and almost brought to the same consistency as out of the tube. So just trying to get those angles right. I'm not worried about this being perfect because it's just a thumbnail. And then I'm going to block in the shadows. Really, right now, I'm just focused on the shadow shapes.
Normally, how many thumbnail sketches do you do before you have your final sketch, would you say?
So I actually have right behind this page is some of my thumbnails for commission work. So like right here is some homework for commissions. So normally I would do a pencil sketch to figure out my composition. And then I will do a painting sketch to get my color relationships, just inform myself a little more. And then same thing for this bottom one, just a composition sketch and then a color sketch. Okay. So generally two, unless there's something that I'm really trying to figure out, I might do more.
I see.
Okay, so still working on the shadow shapes. And remember, this is a thumbnail, so give yourself permission to just be loose with it.
I'm just going to take this time to promo a little thing for Etchr, if you don't mind.
I do not mind at all.
So, hey, everybody, we started to give weekly prizes away. So we used to do the monthly $50 draw to buy products from the Etchr Lab store. So we changed that to a weekly thing. And instead of a $50 voucher that you could possibly win from the draw, it'd actually just be a random prize. So the prize could be sometimes a mini workshop voucher, a sketchbook, an Etchr Lab product voucher. Who knows what you're going to get. So you're actually going to tag us with hashtag Etchr Studio on Instagram or Facebook to be entered into the draw.
Sounds like a exciting little deal.
I think it's pretty sweet. I like the fact that we upped it to a weekly thing.
Yeah, that is cool. Okay, so that is about as much time as I would spend on a thumbnail. you know, you get the gist of what's happening. And a really big thing that I recommend is when I'm looking at my reference photo, you'll even see me doing it. I'm constantly squinting my eyes. When you squint your eyes, it gets rid of all the details. And if you're looking at the reference photo, there's a lot of details on this. So when you squint, it gets rid of all of that and leaves you with shapes of value. So when you squint, you're really just seeing like a big white shape and then all of these dark shapes. And that essentially is the most important thing, is getting those shapes in the right place and the right value, and squinting really helps that. So that has always been something that I push people who are learning how to paint, is squinting their eyes. Okay, so I'm gonna jump into the final painting, and I wanna make sure you can see it. Okay.
So what colors should they have ready? That was a question we just got.
Oh yeah, so for my underpainting, because you'll see like in this one, and I know it's gonna be really close, but you'll see in this one, there's a lot of like an orangish red, almost like a burnt sienna shining through. I do that in almost all of my paintings. For this one specifically, it was about the same color as the roof, so that just worked in my benefit. And then also, I love the moments where these colors shine through.
Yeah, it's super interesting.
And then you'll see in the shadow, the underpainting really shines through. So it's interesting for the eye to look at because it's a cool shadow, but then you have this warmth shining through. So that's going to be my first step. That's going to be a reddish orange. You don't have to have any specific color for that. I just usually land on the warmer side of things. And then I'm going to be using a cadmium yellow. I'm going to be using a cobalt blue and an ultramarine. I use yellow ochre. And then for the greens, I'll probably use my olive green. And then I mute that down with a red. So any type of red we'll use. We don't have much red going on in this painting. But yeah, so like your earth tones would be like a yellow ochre, maybe like a burnt sienna or a Venetian red. Your blues will be a primary, which is like a cobalt, and then an ultramarine. And then your reds, generally speaking, I usually have a warm red and a cool red. So like you can have a cad red and then maybe an alizarin crimson or like a magenta. And then yellows, I'll be using cadmium yellow. And yeah, I think just one yellow. I have a lemon yellow, but I don't think I'm going to use that in this. So yeah, hopefully that cleared that up.
Yeah, thanks.
And since gouache is so similar to watercolor, I often use it like watercolor when I'm starting. So for this first wash, you're gonna see that it will, and I think that's why some people get so confused on the medium that I'm using, because it literally will look like watercolor. So this first wash, I'm gonna use like this Venetian red. It's really similar to like a burnt sienna. So I'm just using a big brush. I'm not really worried about much. I'm also gonna throw in some yellow ochre just to get some change of color in there. And I do this is probably the most asked question that I get, is why do I do this? The color choice is, for me, personal. I like the warmth to shine through. And if anyone looks at my work, you'll see it. I really just love when the warmness shines through. And then also, aside from that, it is easier to paint on a middle value than it is just like a stark white, because then your whole painting, you're just like trying to cover up white. But if you already have a middle value down, you're just painting with it really instead of like against it. And then if it shines through, and it ends up looking really pretty. And excuse my noise, I'm just gonna heat this really quick so that way I don't have to watch it dry.
You should cut it down, so it shouldn't be.
What?
The noise, it shouldn't be too bad because Zoom cuts it out.
Oh, okay.
If you're enjoying this workshop so far, I know we haven't gotten super into it, but Nick will be doing a mini workshop with us. It will be on May 1st. I'm just going to drop a link for that in the chat. If you guys are interested, there's a bunch of info on his class page there. I will also get Nick to elaborate a little bit more about it later on in the live demo.
Okay, I want that first layer to be totally dry because it'll stay on the paper. And that's also why I water it down, because we all know like gouache can be reactivated, but when it's this thin, it's almost like a watercolor. So you're not really gonna get much like reactivation within the painting. If it does happen, you know, that's all just part of it. But yeah, so I like to make sure that that is totally dry. And I'm going to sketch this out really quick. So I'll do that. And then I like to paint background to foreground. So you'll see me go sky, mountains, greenery, building, and then grass and stuff like that. So.
Got a question for you.
Yeah.
Does adding wet paint over the dry paint reactivate the dry paint? Oh, never mind.
No.
You just answered that. Sorry.
Yeah, that is what I was just talking about. I thin it so much to where it's almost like a watercolor.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to get that much reactivation.
Sorry, I wasn't paying
attention. No, you're fine.
And there are multiple types of gouache, right? Like I know there's acrylic gouache, and then there's, I can't remember the other ones.
I think I mean, to my knowledge, I think there's just the two, which is like standard gouache, and then the acrylic gouache, which is in the family of acrylic. You know, once it dries, it dries.
Yeah.
So I don't ever use acrylic gouache. You know, like I like gouache because you can reactivate it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's one of the reasons I love it. So I don't think I've ever used it.
It's funny because I didn't realize that there was like 2 different types, and I just quickly bought a thing of white gouache, not realizing it was like acrylic, thinking I can reactivate it, and I put it into my palette, and then nope, can't do anything with it now. It's just stuck in my palette.
Oh no, that's the worst.
So if you're new to gouache, always check which one you're buying.
yeah, you will be disappointed if you get the acrylic gouache if you're expecting normal gouache. And something I do too for those of you that might be new to perspective, you don't necessarily need to understand perspective to be able to replicate it well. So I hold up my pencil and I'm measuring these angles.
They can't see that screen.
Can they see me?
No.
No. Oh, okay. So I hold up my pencil to the reference photo and I measure that angle and then I bring it over here. So I'll measure that roof and then bring it over here. So it helps you, you know, you don't need to understand perspective to be able to replicate it well. And I'm putting this line there because this structure on top is almost like its own little building. So I just like to separate that because this roof point and this roof point meet at the same place. Yesterday when I was painting, I realized that I had them in the wrong place. So I don't want that to happen again.
Do you tend to have like a go-to brand of gouache?
Yeah, it's Winsor & Newton, especially because of how I carry my gouache. They don't mold. I've had other brands, some brands use some natural materials in their gouache, and I've had some mold. And Winsor & Newton, I've never had anything mold, so I just stick to that, really. And that and Holbein, I really like Holbein as well.
Mm-hmm. I never even thought about that. Yeah, I guess that's totally a possibility if there's natural.
Yeah, because like MH Graham, I believe they use some honey, because I have some of their watercolors and they use honey in their watercolors. I think they use honey in their gouache too, so like that'll mold. And then I used this color, I can't remember, it's that Swiss brand, I can't think of the name, but that one molded and I was pretty surprised by that. So I just stick to Winsor & Newton because I know that won't happen. Because once it molds, you know, you're SOL.
You can't really do much with it.
Yeah, I had to scrape out moldy gouache. Okay, so my building is about done. The drawing, you know, may or may not be perfect, but once it comes to painting, I can start to like fix those types of things. Like if I find out something is wrong. So at this phase, it doesn't really need to be totally perfect. Sketching those mountains in the back, just really giving myself a roadmap to follow throughout this painting. And then the shadow shapes, because that's the whole reason I chose this piece. And then those three doors, really, I was in love with that because they have this cool shadow on the right and then nothing on the left, but it still educates the eye enough that you know what it is. So I thought that was super cool. When I'm choosing reference photos, it's mainly because of the lighting, not necessarily because of what it is.
Right. That's always something good to point out. You can have like such a cool thing to paint, but the lighting can just be totally off.
Yeah, yeah. That's why like having your own reference photos is key, because you know what you're looking for, but that's not always possible.
I also find it helps when you're like, if you're Google imaging, searching, to just search like high contrast.
Yeah. I like to find like an image that I like, and then when you click the image, there's more related images.
Yeah.
And usually within those is where I think that's like how I found this photo. Okay, so I'm pretty content with that drawing. It's 2-point perspective. These are pretty accurate. So yeah, I'm gonna get into painting. And I'm going to, let's see, trying to figure out the best place to put my phone. That should work.
And that pencil you were using, sorry, it's a Blackwing one, right?
It is, yes. Yeah, I love Blackwings. Not for everything, because they are really soft. So they will, like when I paint over them, they will like reactivate. So sometimes they can muddy up your paintings. So if I'm doing like this one will be fine, but sometimes I'll just use like an HB or like a 2H, because the graphite is so hard that it won't reactivate or like move per se. Because I don't really want to seal it. I feel like that's what some people would recommend or say, because I want the paper to still be there.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the mountains, and I want that to be a really soft edge because we're dealing with atmospheric perspective here. So I'm mixing together an ultramarine blue. It tends to be the perfect blue for mountains in the distance, with just a touch of like a magenta. And then I'll throw it down and see, like that's way too dark. It's still too dark. I use my white. I don't ever put my white in here. I use my white fresh out of the tube, just because that's like the most important paint to have totally fresh.
Mm-hmm. I agree. All colors end up getting a little muddy in your palette.
Yeah. Okay, so we're getting there. And the thing with gouache too is that your dark values dry lighter and your light values dry darker. So sometimes it's kind of hard to really figure out what is gonna happen. But I like that color.
That's really interesting. The light ones dry darker and the
yeah, like when it oxidizes, some weird things can happen, and then you're like, man, that is not what I intended. So then you got to go back, and that's when I start adding like textured layers. Is it like glides over the paint and creates this really cool texture. And for me personally, I'm not trying to paint every square inch. So you'll notice I'm purposefully leaving gaps because, you know, that's why I toned the paper, because I want that stuff to still be present. It creates a really nice harmony and warmth throughout the whole painting.
Do you ever just work on toned paper?
I do, yeah. I don't, yeah. So like these gray ones are toned. I really like that because when it's on gray paper, it really makes like the gouache pop. Like this one right here is the most vibrant, you know, painting. And I just leave the paper on the rest of it. So yeah, definitely. So now I'm gonna go into the sky and I'm gonna create a loose edge. So I'm using still that ultramarine like little section that I just mixed, but I'm pulling in a little bit of my primary blue, which is like a cobalt or like a phthalo. And starting at the bottom is where it's furthest away from the viewer. So I want it to be as much whiter, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get you.
Even more whiter than that. So this is what helps you convey atmospheric perspective.
So if somebody following along only has watercolor right now, could they do some of the stuff that you're doing right now, or would they need gouache because it's like way more opaque?
Yeah, because even if, I'm not really doing any methods that would work for watercolor. You know, like right now I'm using white paint. If they have watercolor and any type of white opaque paint, or some watercolor palettes have like a white, that might work. But I am painting opaquely, basically, if that makes sense.
So they would need to do like just a really thick paint, not add a lot of water to their paint if they wanted to try.
Yeah, that might work because some watercolors you can kind of get thick per se. It could work for
you
sure.
You could try it and tag us on social media with hashtag Etchr Studio, and we'll see how it turns out compared to gouache.
So right now, this is one big thing about atmospheric perspective is your edges. Edge control is super, super important. And I think it's something that new painters maybe aren't aware of, don't pay attention to, or it's just not what people pay attention to when they're teaching. So right now with a wet brush, I'm just softening the mountain and the sky into each other. And then you'll see too, it's pulling up a little bit of that warmth, which I'm totally fine with. And so I'll just do that on both sides. So this is the cool thing about gouache, you know, that was pretty much dry, but I can just go in and reactivate it and like make those changes. And I'm going to pull in just a little more white. And then let that mingle with the other colors that are already there.
We got a comment, and I'm super curious if you've ever tried this. Someone said you can add white gesso to your watercolors to make them more opaque.
I've never tried that, but I was almost going to recommend like trying any, like not even just gesso, just like any type of white paint, because really you're just adding pigment. So I think that would be the same thing.
Even like you can water down acrylic paint a lot too.
Right.
So if you had like a tiny little bit of white acrylic paint or something, you can probably play with the opaqueness of watercolor.
So now I'm just throwing in the sky, and you'll notice you need to get bluer as the sky gets closer to you. And I'm just throwing that in roughly, letting that underpainting shine through. And then I might even go over my sketch just a little bit, which is totally fine. And this is why I like to use the paint fresh, you know, or out of the tube, just because it has a lot more movement, and I can get a lot of textures.
So just let you know we're about halfway through.
Yeah, I saw that.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna talk a little less and paint more.
Yeah, no problem.
But if there are questions, just let me know.
Yeah, for sure. It goes by quick, eh? When you're talking, you don't realize how long it takes.
Yeah, right? Yeah, I don't want to spend 30 minutes on the sky, so we're getting to it. So again, just adding more white on top, pushing that atmospheric perspective. That's what makes this whole thing believable. And then I'm going to very quickly and loosely add in some foliage. On top of that, I'm using green and a little bit of red because I want it to be a nice dark value. But stoplight green doesn't exist in nature, so I mute it down with red, which is its complement. And I don't want to use that brush. So just loose gestures of foliage.
Do you find holding your paintbrush like so far up makes it easier to do loose movements?
Yeah. Yeah. Like when I taught watercolor classes, people would hold the brush like right here. And it's like, you can't paint like that. You got to hold it back and let the brush, you know, the tool that you're using do the work for you.
Yeah. I have a really bad habit of doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we want control and we think that, you know, helps. So then on top of that, I'm just adding in some lighter values with the same green. I just added a bit of white and yellow because if it's sunlit, you know, it's going to have a lot of warmth in it. And these are super loose because they're, well, first and foremost, they're not the most important thing, and they're in the background. So now for the building, this is where my yellow ochre comes in because I like them to have like a bit of like this pretty green hue. So I'm just using a bit of yellow ochre, a bit of blue, and a little bit of white. So that color right now, I can already tell is going to be too dark because I'm just familiar with gouache and I know how that's going to dry. So that is not the value that I want, but the only way you can find out is by laying it down. So I added a little bit more white. And like I said previously, the reason I love to paint white is because of the beautiful blue shadows.
Yeah. It's always interesting to see how people will shadow white. I've seen people do like light purples and stuff like that too. Like when they're doing flowers or something. It's really cool.
Yeah.
It's always hard to figure out how to do it with white.
Yeah, because it's hard because like you're thinking shadows, which is a dark value, but also you need to think white because the shadows aren't as dark as you like would want them to be per se. So right now I'm just lifting up like a little bit because I want some warmth to be in there of that undertone. And then block in this. Right now I'm just thinking about these big shapes. You know, I'll do details and I'll finesse the structure later. Big details, or I mean big shapes, not details. And I always like to start with my darkest values. Place the shadow on the roof. And I am using like this beat up oil brush because it gives me some textures that like a brand new brush won't be able to do because it'll cover everything. So I like when, you know, it's just a little rough around the edges. I think it gives the eye a lot more to look at and, you know, absorb.
We had an artist the other day, she used her old brush and she like cut it in a weird way to do like loose foliage. Really interesting. It was a really good idea.
Yeah, I've seen stuff like that.
Always find purposes for those old art materials.
Right, right. And there's no like, you know, right way to do it. There's no rules.
Yeah, for sure.
So now with another oil brush, I'm just going to lighten this area because this, if you look at that reference photo, this side of the building, it is in shadow, but also it's getting a lot of light from just the sky itself. So I like to push that with just doing a light dry texture on top. And then placing that shadow of the building. This is part where I want that warmth to shine through. I just think it looks cool. And then there's those big shadows under the building. So I like to place that first, and then if you squint your eyes, this already makes a lot of sense, even without the white, because the paper is just like a nice middle value. So it's cool when things start to make sense already just by placing, you know, those shadows in there. And then I'm just gonna lighten that one a bit. I do this really dry. This is like a dry brush technique. I just like to add some depth to the shadows and lighten them up. I'm also using a little bit of yellow ochre, so I warm them up just a little bit.
Saving a lot of good questions for the chat here.
Cool. Yeah, I'm excited to hear what everyone is curious about. Okay, so the big picture, you know, items are kind of blocked in. You can see now that the sky is dry, it's a little darker than I would want, so that might be something I fix later. But I'm going to go in and start blocking in, you know, the prettiest part of this, which is that gorgeous white. So I'm going to be using a warm white because this is a sunlit building. So even though it's white, there's still going to be a lot of warmth in it. And this is when I can start to fix any shapes that I don't like. Like this shadow is not at the right angle, but it's okay because I can just fix it. And then I am using like a dry, like there's no water in this paint basically. So this is just out of the tube. And it gets this really dry, this pretty dry texture. And the underpainting really shines through. And I want that to happen because it makes this building feel even more beat up, because it is, if you're looking at that reference photo. So this is just white paint with a little bit of yellow in it, and it'll create these really pretty textures. And in some places I go whiter, some places I go warmer.
Some of the comments here saying how it's so wonderful and calming to watch you paint.
I get that a lot. I get that a lot. I my my like bio on TikTok, I am a self-proclaimed your local gay Bob Ross. So I'm totally fine with that. I had a local newspaper write an article about me, and that was their title, is St. Louis's local gay Bob Ross. So I'm fine with that.
Nick, is it possible, someone just mentioned how it's a little bit difficult. They can see more of your sketch than the painting.
Oh, yeah,
Is it
yeah.
possible to, sorry, I should have pointed that out earlier.
No, it's fine. I'm gonna, so this might move a little bit, so bear with me. I'm just gonna raise this and maybe put you over the painting.
Sure, yeah. Sorry about that, everybody. Just quick little tech issue. Yeah, that's a little better.
Yeah, the sketch is not that important.
Was at the beginning, but.
Right.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Yeah. So again, you can see that there's a lot of pull with the brush because this paint has no water in it. So it's just dry gouache, basically. It feels dry. So you'll see I'm covering up those doors just a little bit, but I'll come back in and fix those, you know, add more if I need to. Real quick, while I have white on my brush, I'm just gonna add some sky stuff. I feel like that got lost. So I throw down some white and then I'm just gonna like brush it in.
Did you just add a little bit more water to?
Yeah, that one was a little watery. Yeah, because I wanted it to be able to blend in. So then I just work it in a little bit. I'll even use my fingers to soften the edges. Make sure my mountain doesn't get crispy. I want that to stay loose. So this is one of the main reasons I love gouache, that you can just come in and, you know, wake everything up without it, like, but you still have control. It's like this weird thing of like, you still have control, but it's so versatile and forgiving, in my opinion. Okay, that's a little better. And I'm going to use this sky to carve out the roof a little bit.
So for your mini workshop, are you going to be doing another architectural landscape?
I won't be. I won't be doing architecture, but it does tie in because I will be painting a lot of white. So I've decided to do Mount Rainier, which is this beautiful mountain in Washington. But what's really cool is that it's kind of going to be a diptych. So it's going to be 2 paintings in one, which I know they can't see it, but you can see it's right here.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it's a big painting, sunset, and then like midday. And I chose that because it has a lot of snow, which will play into the same thing as far as shadows go.
Right.
So I'm very excited about that. I had so much fun painting that.
I just dropped the class page link if you guys are curious and want to see the images that he just talked about. They're in the class description as the reference.
So now I'm just throwing in some darker shadows, the bottom of the roof. And I am holding, right now I'm using an oil brush, so it's really long, but I do not hold my brush close to the bristles because at the end of the day, I am painting and I want it to be a painting. I'm not, I'm not painting in trompe l'oeil. I don't need this to look like a photograph, I want this to be a painting. So I think the further you hold your brush back, the less control you have, but in a good way. That's not a bad thing. I think especially starting out, people are so afraid of that, like losing control. But then that's also the thing that they always strive for. It's like, how do you get those loose paintings? And it's like, well, don't hold your brush like a pencil, and that will help.
That's some excellent advice. It's definitely something that I'm learning to lose control over and just
it is hard because we want that control. We want the art to be the thing that we want it to be, but sometimes just letting those things happen is nice. So just fixing those shadow shapes. I wanted to change the angle on that one.
So we will be starting the Q&A in a little bit.
Cool.
Nick, feel free to work through it and just kind of answer the questions as you
Yeah, I will keep painting and I can talk at the same time.
So we do have a decent amount that I saved from the chat earlier. So if you don't mind, I'll just start out. So what got you into art? Have you been doing it since a kid or?
No, I am not. I think if I can inspire anyone, it is the fact that I have not been doing this long. So I just figured out that I wanted to paint in 2015. So I guess what is that? I'm at 6 years now. No, I just, it's weird because art runs in my blood. And if anyone listens to the podcast, I kind of go into this a little more in depth. Art is in my family, but finding art as my passion was on my own discovery. I ironically randomly got this idea that I wanted to draw my own tattoo. In hindsight, I'm glad I didn't get that tattoo because I didn't know how to draw. But it was that act of drawing, that little bit of drawing that made me realize like, whoa, I really like this. And then I picked up like a watercolor set, and that's where it started really, was with watercolor. So I have a sweet spot for watercolor. I think that's why I like gouache, because it's similar, but it's also, you have a little bit more control.
Yeah, for sure. So this question, I hope I read it right. Are you painting on cards or are they mounted afterwards? I don't know if you understand that. Maybe the person.
Right. I think I know what they're asking. Right now I'm painting in a sketchbook, but when I do commissions like this one, this isn't a commission, but my professional work is on crescent board. So I don't need to mount it because it's really like, if you can listen.
Yeah,
it's really rigid. It's almost like a canvas, but it's an illustration board. Super thick, super rigid. I do that because, then I don't have to mount it. It's already secure. It's already archival. It just makes life a little easier painting on something that's already good to go.
For sure.
I think that's what they were asking.
Yeah, I think so too. So if you had to choose like 5 to 6 base colors that you would always use, what would they be?
5 to 6. Okay. Yellow ochre.
Sorry, that's a tough question.
That is a yellow ochre, ultramarine blue. I'm gonna do yellows. Okay, so yellow ochre, probably cadmium yellow light. I'm basically just choosing split primaries. So then I would do cad red and then probably alizarin crimson. That's 4. And then ultramarine blue, cobalt blue. So yeah, I mean that's just split primaries, but I think that palette, either that or the Zorn palette, but the Zorn palette isn't good for all landscapes because you're really missing out on the vibrancy.
Yeah. But that one gives you a good like set to mix and get like a variety of colors.
Yeah, because you can mix your greens, you can mix your, that would be the perfect little palette.
So you said you used to paint watercolor first. Did you do that for a long time before discovering gouache?
Yeah, it wasn't until school that I was introduced to gouache. I had no idea what gouache was. And that's probably another question, I'm sure. I did go to school, but it was only a year and a half because that was very expensive and I couldn't afford it. So I studied for 3 semesters. That's it. And then ever since then, I've just been doing my own thing. But out of that education, I'm so grateful because I was introduced to gouache. And ever since then, I just really, really, really loved it. I did watercolor for a while though. I think as most beginning artists, it's just really accessible. All you need is water, you know? Like oil painting is still intimidating because you need so much stuff.
Yeah.
But watercolor is just nice and easy and simple and like travel easy and, all of the above.
Yeah.
And then I was a watercolor teacher for 2 years, which I really loved that. And yeah, I don't know. I just stuck with me and gouache are best friends. We just stick together.
So I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but watercolor or gouache containing gum arabic, would that mold?
I don't think so because I think that's all that Winsor & Newton has.
Okay.
Of course, this one doesn't have an ingredient on it, but that is the binder in gouache. Pigment like that. Yeah, this doesn't have an ingredient on it, but I think that's all Winsor & Newton uses. I could be wrong, so maybe I don't know the answer. But it's when they start adding other stuff that I'm curious. I keep my paint under here. So this brand is the one, Karen Dache. That's the one that molded. It doesn't have ingredients, but that was the brand that did mold. Holbein and Winsor & Newton have yet to create any mold. So if anyone is really curious, look at the ingredient differences in those. And then as far as this barn goes, I'm pretty happy with where it's at right now. I've created really nice lighting up here and here. Now I'm going to add the textures. If you're looking at the reference photo, it has a lot of texture and like the wood, I think it's like lap wood or whatever. I don't usually do this part when it's vertical like this, but if you just suggest the lines are there, it'll read to the viewer, you know, that has a lot of texture. So, was there any other questions?
Oh yeah, for sure. Sorry, I'm just reading. So if you are somebody who's really nervous and new to gouache, after you do your first base layer, could you then pencil again where you'd want everything?
Yes. Yeah. I could even draw over this, you know, like actually in this one, in that you can't really see, but in this one, I threw in some graphite right there
Okay,
to like accentuate that little square. I guess it was a label at one point. So absolutely, I actually, a really popular combination is gouache and colored pencil.
I see that a lot, yeah.
So you can absolutely draw on this. Even if I painted this, I could draw my composition again. So yeah, for sure. If you want something to rely on and really follow, that is absolutely, yes. I would even maybe recommend it.
Do you actually know the location of this reference photo?
I don't. I wish I did. I wish I did, but there are mountains in the back. So I want to say it's probably out west. I don't know. I wish. Because originally when I painted it, I just wanted to paint it. And then when I decided to teach it, you know, I wish it was my photo, because that would just be so much better. No, I wish I knew anything about that.
Why use a thumbnail sketch instead of the reference photo?
So the thumbnail sketch, that's a good question. I've recently gotten into doing more thumbnails, and if I could put it plainly, basically what it, okay, so like singers have to warm up, right? They do vocal exercises instead of just jumping in. If you can think of it kind of the same way, that is just a warm up for you to get familiar with the angles, with the shapes, with the shadows, and to compose it. Because your reference photo, you might not be painting the whole thing. You might just be composing part of it. And it's just like in my little painting thumbnails that I showed a little bit earlier, I do those because it educates me for anything that might come up within the painting. You know, it's a warm up basically.
Yeah. And
if it's for commission, you want to be warmed up. You know, you want to know the decisions that you're making, why you're making them. It's not something I've always done. I'm new to like doing thumbnails because it is that extra step, you know, and you know, us painters, we just want to start painting as soon as possible. Yeah. So I get that there might be some hesitancy, but I tell you what, when you start doing thumbnails and then you go into the final, you will feel just like, you'll feel educated basically on what's happening.
I also think like it's good too, because sometimes there's something in the reference photo that you may not want to include, like it just doesn't make sense for your drawing or painting, and working it out with thumbnail sketches is a really good way.
Yeah, like, or if you need to move something, or you know, do I want clouds? Do I not want clouds?
Yeah.
How blue do I want the sky? You know, like all of those little decisions you can figure out beforehand.
Yeah.
So now I'm just laying in, you know, little suggestions of plants and foliage. Any other questions?
Yeah. How many times a week would you say that you usually spend painting?
Every single day.
Every single day.
All day, every day. Right now, specifically, I'm doing plein April. So every day of the month, I'm painting in plein air. Aside from that, this is my job, my livelihood. So I'm painting all day, every day.
Yeah.
You know, I work with a licensing company, so I try to give them work and, you know, just do whatever I can to, you know, stay successful, because if I ever have to get a normal job again, I won't be too thrilled. Yeah.
Do you ever paint just from your head, or do you always have somewhat of a reference?
I'm not one of those people that paints from imagination. I don't even really enjoy it that much.
Really?
Because I don't know, I would just rather look at something and then change it. And I don't know, I just want that little bit of education to like look at something and figure out what's going on. I do it. And recently I've tried to make myself do it more because I know it is good practice, like stretching and strengthening those creative muscles.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't all that often. I really don't. I just like painting from life and representing what's there, but then in my own way. That's what I enjoy.
So you paint more realistic things. You don't dive into the fantasy realm too much.
Yeah, not really. And if it is in a fantasy realm, it's coming from something realistic and I'm just like pushing and pulling to make it like mine. But yeah, I'm not like into character design. I'm not into really like creating things that don't exist, you know.
Right. Yeah.
That's not me. And I've that was a hard thing to come to terms with because I like, you know, as all artists, I would compare myself and I'm like, man, why can't I do that? Why can't I just create this world that doesn't exist like this person's doing? But then I just realized like that's not me, and that's okay. That's not the type of painter that I am. So I definitely had to come to terms with that.
Did it take you a while to find your style?
It did. It did and it didn't. I know that's a bad answer. Because I think everything you touch is your style. And I think young artists like look for that answer so hard, but it's already happening right in front of you. And I think like we miss out on that because say you're painting a water. I painted a lot of watercolor vegetables and you know, I didn't really have a style back then, but still how I chose to paint them is like that was my style and it just kept evolving, you know. So, but now I think I am pretty ingrained in like how I paint, you know, how I lay down paint.
Yeah, for sure. Question about your setup. What is the setup you use to hold your sketchbook? Also, what is the setup you use for painting outside? I've seen it on TikTok and it looks cool.
Yeah, so I'm using what I use in TikTok right here. So I'll back up a little bit. So this is it's called a pochette box. And really what it is a old cigar box. And if you want to put in the comments, it's from Tad Retz. So it's TADRETZ. Just look up his Instagram and he makes these by hand. And really it's the most simple little thing, but it's so perfect. I have done hundreds and hundreds of paintings on this pochette box. And then below, he put a little, you know, this is where cigars would go, but now it's for gouache paint. So,
oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So then I just, I usually clip my own work like with these clips because I just want it to be really secure. Yeah, that's what I paint almost everything on.
Nice.
So I'm going to add in just a few suggestions of clouds. And then pull off the tape and we're about done, which fits with our timing.
Yeah, for sure. I have a couple more questions coming up in the chat.
Yeah.
I'll just ask a few more and then we should be done soon.
Cool.
So there's this person is new to gouache and they're struggling to get the consistency of the paint right. Especially for working opaquely. They're wondering, is anyone using gouache with watercolor brushes for plein air? And they're wondering if that's maybe her issue. She needs to get new brushes or sorry.
Okay, so consistency is really, I don't know. That's like a really popular question that I think people struggle with. It depends on what kind of brushes you're using. So if you're using a watercolor brush that's like this, where it's real sable and it's just really, really soft and absorbent, that could be a problem. But like this Etchr brush, I think this is technically a watercolor brush, but it's synthetic, so it's not absorbent. So it'll lay down paint better and it's a little more stiff. So that will help you. As far as consistency goes, don't be afraid to use it straight out of the tube. That is where my consistency is most of the time. But if you feel like it's too thick, you know, like all of these, I hope they can see this, but like this dry brushing technique where it's like rough, that is because it is straight out of the tube. You know, it's just a dry, like medium. It's like this chalky, interesting medium. But if you don't like that, just add little, like, I'll show you how I dip in my water. Like I just touch the water with my brush and that's it. Because if you throw down a lot of water, well, then now you have watercolor. So you really got to be controlling with how much water you're picking up and then laying down. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I love that brush tub. By the way, I had the same one.
This brush?
The brush tub.
Oh, brush tub. Yeah.
I have the same one. I love it. Okay, I think we have another question. I'm just scrolling up to find it. Do you have an online gallery or social media preference for following? Insta, personal website, etc.?
Yeah. Can that be linked in the video or? Well, okay. So every social media.
I can just type it into the chat now.
Yeah. So every social media platform is Nicholas Holman Art. Instagram and TikTok is where I post most frequently. On both of those social medias, you will see the link to my Etsy. So that's where my shop is. And then my website is kind of like set up as a gallery. That is just nicholasholman.art. And there you can see just a little bit more work. I probably need to update it, but.
We also have, you ended up doing some prints with us, right?
Yeah, I think so. I sent them, so I'm assuming yes.
So if you guys check out our print section from the artist's work that we have on, he has a bundle available there.
Yeah, it's like 3 really pretty like foliage prints. So right now I'm just adding clouds, and it's cool too because you can kind of compose with these, you know, like I can add some emphasis if I want in places. And I'm using like a muted kind of gray, little more on the violet side to throw in the shadows. Because if you think the sun is yellow and on the light spectrum, which is different than the color spectrum, the complement is going to be in the violet realm. So I like to have some violets in there because the complement is yellow. And then they just kind of blend into the background.
Would you say that oil brushes are good to use with gouache?
Yeah, that's what I'm using as we speak. It's just this rough Bristol brush that that's actually what I've transitioned into like fully. I like as of right now, I'm only using oil brushes because they lay down this texture that I'm just obsessed with. And I feel like I can be a lot rougher with them, you know, just like really get in there and lay down the paint and not be afraid of like damaging a watercolor brush per se. So yeah, I love using oil brushes.
Also, if you guys have a look over on our website, today we just dropped our gouache brush line,
which is super exciting.
Yeah, it comes in like a beautiful like beige canvas roll. It's really nice. And then we also dropped our pearlescent watercolor paints as well today. Alrighty, I'm gonna start to wrap things up. Nick, would you say you're almost done?
Yeah, I am. I was just about to start peeling off the tape, and I'm pretty content with this little study that we got going on. Is that all the questions?
Yeah, I think so. I apologize if I missed anybody's.
And a hot tip for peeling off tape, if you see the very first sign of it pulling the paper, do yourself a favor and heat up the paint with a like craft dryer or like a blow dryer. It deactivates the glue and it'll separate from the paper. So you can, like, no matter what paper, if you really, really heat it up, it should just pull off perfectly.
That's something that I get annoyed with a lot, and I bought all these different types of tape and whatnot, and it's just I could never figure out why. So I'm really glad you said that.
Yeah, just put your dryer over it, like get it pretty hot, and then you'll see sometimes even like the tape glue is on the paper because it became that deactivated, and then you can just rub it off because it's just like a soft glue.
I've heard someone say too that you can just use like friction in your finger. I guess if you're in a scenario like plein air or something and you don't have your blow dryer.
Right.
Beautiful. I love the textures.
Yeah, it has, and I really focus on that. You know, that's something I really like is those rough textures. I love when the underpainting shines through, it matches the roof, and it all just becomes cohesive because you're getting little peaks of it everywhere.
Love it.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna drop the link to the survey again. If you guys have noticed, I've been casually dropping it throughout the demo. It's just a quick, like less than 2-minute multiple choice survey. It helps us to improve content for future demos, or if you don't think we need to improve anything at all and you just want to tell us how great of a job we did, that's great too.
Yeah.
And or if you have questions or anything, you can just put them in there, and I'm sure we will figure things out. And like I said, this is a fairly new process for us. I think we just started this a little bit before the pandemic, so we're still adjusting to things. So yeah, if you have any comments or suggestions, don't be shy. Just please type them in there.
And on a personal note, if you have questions aside from Etchr and you just want to reach out to me about anything, you are more than welcome to message me on Instagram. I just wanted to throw that out there. I always want to be, there's so many artists out there that I look up to and admire, and like and I understand we're all busy, but like I would message them, they would read it and then never respond. And I know how that feels. So I always try and be the artist that will actually respond, you know, like be approachable, because we're all just trying to figure out the same thing and putting ground earth on paper and make it look like something.
Yeah, for sure. And that's so sweet of you to say, because I know for myself, getting into it a lot this year, like I've always kind of been into it, but really trying to do it full time now. And that's something that I've done. And yeah, it's definitely really sweet when they respond and give you just a little tidbit of advice. It's great.
Yeah, even if it's just a quick reply, I just think that goes, I don't know, it just means a lot. And I've been in that position. So I want to be that person that will, you know, respond. So feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm also going to drop, again, the link to his class page on May 1st. Sorry, his mini workshop.
Oh, can I show what we're painting on May 1st?
Yeah, for sure. Your face is shown now, so people can see.
Oh, okay.
Both screens, whatever you prefer.
Yeah, so on May 1st, I wanted to take the idea of the white shadows, but like make it bigger and better. And yeah, so it'll be interesting. So we are going to be painting 2 paintings in the demo. These are both Mount Rainier, just from different perspectives and obviously different times of day. I just really want to show like the versatility of gouache and like how to use it, and then how to convey the warm snow and then those cool shadows. And also, I think two paintings are better than one. You know, this barn, it tells a story in itself. But if you have two next to each other on the same thing, I think it's just like more interesting, more intriguing. And it's something I actually do often, is painting more than one painting on the same page. Not necessarily a diptych, because that's like where they're connected and like a part of the same thing. But yeah, so this will be on May 1st. It probably won't be as large because I know there's time constraints. But yeah, I'm very excited about this.
Yeah, can't wait to see you all there. You all should just go sign up right now.
Do it.
With that being said, thank you all so much. Again, my name is Brittany. I was your host today. Thank you again, Nicholas, for joining us. You're an amazing teacher.
Thanks.
All the feedback is so positive, and everybody's saying, like, we had a lot of new gouache users, and they were just saying this was great.
Cool. That's awesome. I hope that I have like a language that's like, you know, understandable. That's like one of my biggest goals. So
for sure, yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you all have a wonderful day. And with that being said, I hope to see you at our next live.
thanks for coming.
Bye.